What's up, and welcome back to the podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking a little bit more about where we left off, but also how my invisible sickness started becoming a little bit more visible. I believe where I left off in the last episode was talking more about how the silence broke me. And I think that's the best way I can describe it. Because days kept passing, but they all looked the same. The world kept moving, people kept laughing, working, talking, but I was just stuck in slow motion. It was like life was happening on the other side of a glass wall. And I could see it, but I couldn't reach it type of feel. I was there, but not really living. I don't know if that really made sense, but that's the best way I could put it into words, especially at the time. I stopped talking about how I felt because I didn't think anyone would understand. People always said the same things. It gets better, you need to pray more, and you're strong. But none of those words made me feel better, or at least not anymore. They only reminded me that I was supposed to be okay by now, but I wasn't. Even simple things became hard. I tried to listen to music, but every song reminded me of who I used to be. I'd open my journal and stare at the blank pages because that's just my docs app on my Google. But I was too afraid to write because the truth of how I felt scared me. I didn't even recognize myself anymore. Some nights, I'd shift into the dark and just sit there, physically, just listening to the quiet, the hum around me of the world, and the kind of quiet that just feels almost too loud. My thoughts would spiral, whispering things I didn't want to hear, like my brain just telling me that I'm a burden, or that I was a disappointment, even almost believing that God was tired of me. Those thoughts were cruel, but they felt so real. I went to church. If I physically could, because it felt wrong not to. I've just always grown up in a household where church just wasn't an option. And so it was just a normal thing to keep going to church, even though I stayed quiet and I couldn't lift my hands and I couldn't sing the same lyrics and I couldn't smile as much. I stood there and watched everyone else worship like they had a direct line to heaven, while I was metaphorically locked outside. I wanted to believe God was still near me because I had the head knowledge that He was. But all I felt was distance. I remember one night laying in my bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling completely numb. Surprisingly, no tears. I had no prayers, just nothing. It scared me how comfortable I was getting with just the emptiness around me, how easy it was to stop fighting. I wasn't living anymore. I was just existing and floating through my own pain, waiting for something, anything, to change. That's what darkness does. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just sits with you quietly, convincing you that this was all there and this is all that will ever be. And honestly, for a while I believed it. But even then, even when I didn't want to admit it, somewhere inside me, something small still refused to die. I wasn't hopeful It sure wasn't hope, or at least not yet. It wasn't peace. It was more like a faint longing in my heart. That might sound a little too cheesy, but it was weak but steady. It was just this feeling that reminded me that I was still here. And maybe that God didn't give up on me. So that feeling would come. It would come to me through the most unexpected ways. Ways I couldn't even put into words. Mind you, it did not happen all at once. There was not some big moment or sudden change in how I felt. The pain didn't magically disappear, but somewhere in the middle of all that numbness, I felt like something small started to begin to stir. It was more quiet. One morning as I was sitting alone, something like, maybe this isn't how it ends, popped into my head. I didn't even know where it came from, and it was more of a thought than a big idea. But for a second, I almost ignored it, but it stayed, surprisingly replaying in my mind, wrapped in a lot of confusion. I still hurt, and I still felt lost. But every once in a while, there'd be this small moment that reminded me what it felt like to be alive. Or, for lack of better words, to live. Like when the sun came through my window. I mean, through the curtains. But I felt the warmth. Or when I laughed at something completely random. Even though it caught me off guard, there were tiny things that mattered. There were still days when I didn't want to talk to anyone, when I felt like I was drowning all over again, metaphorically or physically. But every time I thought I couldn't take another day, somehow I still woke up the next morning. I started realizing that maybe surviving itself was something holy. And I don't really know how to explain that, except that was the faith I had. I wasn't ready to say everything was okay, but sometimes, even when worship music played softly in the background, I'd kind of feel my chest ache in a way that almost felt like hope, in a way that I was trying to breathe in the hope again. It wasn't peace. It wasn't healing. It was just something small, something that I couldn't name. But I think now that it was God. Not in the loud, not in the miraculous way that I'd imagined, but the quiet way. He comes when you're too weak to reach for him. It was like he was sitting there in the dark with me, not asking me to stand up yet, not rushing me to get better. Almost like he was just reminding me that he was still there. And even though I couldn't sing the same words in worship, I started to believe that maybe one day I would again. And that was a big thing for me. And that was kind of the pattern for a while. It started to feel like I was mentally healing again. And at the same time, my body, my brain, my heart almost didn't want to believe it. That it was too good to be true, that I was finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Now, here's the switch up in my story when the mirror started telling a story that I wasn't ready for. And I had never thought that I would ever share this story publicly, or at least to my community around me. I'm not even gonna lie. It's making me very anxious to even think about how vulnerable this is. But God moves in the uncomfort. So here I go. For me, this happened very slow at first. The kind of slow that slips right under your radar. And a few strands here and a few strands there. But nothing dramatic. Nothing that made me stop. But then days kept passing and something inside me began to feel off. I don't know, but I was starting to realize that something isn't how it used to be. I'd brush my hair day and night and notice more than usual coming out. I'd run my fingers through it and I'd feel strands drift away like they were tired of hanging on. I tried to shrug it off. I mean, at least to others, and say that it was fine. I told myself that it was fine, that it was stress or hormones. Again, I've lost hair before, whatever, you know? But there were only so many times you can say it's fine before you realize it isn't. And my panic FaceTime calls really did not help me. Just saying over and over, I'm balding. Like, I see a little bitty spot. I'm losing hair. My hair's thinning. I don't know what I'm doing. Well, the night it truly hit me, I was getting ready for a bath. And I brushed my hair. And then I grabbed a small comb, to brush over my scalp, just like how I've always done before, washing my hair to get all of the product and dry shampoo and oil off. Well, I pulled my hair into my hands and a small handful, an actual handful, came out. Not a few strands, not a little piece, clumps. I remember freezing. I remember staring down at what was in my palm. My stomach twisted fast. I thought I might get sick. I literally was so nauseous. My heart started racing again. Not unusual for me, but this was a panicked race. And for a moment, I literally lost my breath. It didn't feel real. It didn't feel like my hair. It didn't feel like my life. I already had pretty thin hair. It had been gradually thinning for about a year, and I blamed it on stress and sickness and POTS or whatever made sense. But this sudden, aggressive shedding, it hit me like a wave that I did not see coming, a wave that knocked something loose inside of me. Seeing with POTS, symptoms don't just sit still and they don't behave. They definitely don't warn you. 1 month it's dizziness every day. Then it's your stomach. Then it's your chest. Then your sleep. Then your bones. Then, I guess apparently, your hair. Your symptoms can disappear for months, only to show back up overnight like they never left. Hey, or wake you up with new ones you didn't even know were possible. A body at war never gives you the courtesy of a schedule. And my body, it was flaring at random. My hair falling out felt like the latest attack. And somehow this one felt way more personal. Like, I'm Emma, the girl with long, beautiful brown hair everyone asked to play with. I kept saying over and over in my head, this cannot be happening. This cannot be happening. This cannot be happening. And I understand that probably wasn't very humble of myself, but that's just my immediate panic was, what are you talking about? I've always had brown hair, normally long, and everybody always was like, wow, your hair's so pretty, your hair's so pretty. It felt like such a big part of me. I tried talking about it to a few. Some would look at me with that gentle confusion, the kind that says, I hear you, but I don't really understand. And a lot of people would suggest and say things, to ease my mind and comfort. But it wasn't happening to everyone. It was happening, here we go, humble again. It was happening to me. It was happening to me in the middle of a season where everything I thought I could control was slipping through my fingers. And what hurt wasn't just the hair, it was how alone the fear felt. Like, the battle I've been fighting internally is now somehow external. So every shower became something I dreaded. For me, watching the bottom of the tub fill with pieces of my hair that my body had made, that had been on my head, made my chest hurt. Brushing my hair felt like willingly ripping parts of myself away. I'd avoid mirrors because I didn't want to see the thin patches that were slowly forming. I didn't want to see the girl looking back at me in the mirror because I felt like the girl I was looking at didn't even feel like me. Yet, at the same time, I had already felt like I had no control over myself and what was happening. I almost couldn't help, but I'd catch myself face to face with my reflection, just staring at my first small bald spot. Losing hair seems small until it's your hair, until it is your hair, until you're already sick, already tired, and already grieving the person you used to be. And then suddenly, it feels like the final straw. Like, I felt like my body was just peeling off the last pieces that I had left to hold on to. One night, after a bath, I sat on my bathroom floor with a towel around my shoulders. I watched strands streak into the fabric, to my hands, to the floor. I picked them up one by one, and the more I gathered, the more my eyes burned from my tears. And then I just broke. Not a loud breakdown, not a dramatic one. Just a quiet, shaking kind of cry. The kind that becomes for lack of better words, that comes out when you've been strong for too long. I remember whispering, "Why this, God? Why now? Why one more thing?" I would say, though, not in anger, just exhaustion, just hurt, because it wasn't just hair. It was everything hair represented. My hair made me feel more feminine. It made my confidence better. It made my sense of normalcy normal. It was my appearance. It was my physical proof that something was wrong inside my body. I did not feel beautiful. I didn't feel stable. And I did not feel like myself. And yet, even in this moment of absolute vulnerability, sitting on the cold bathroom floor, holding pieces of my hair in my hands, I felt something quieter than my fear. It wasn't peace or clarity, just a presence, that stillness I didn't create. It almost felt to me that God was whispering back. He knew it hurt, but he wasn't leaving me. He did not fix it. He didn't magically stop the shedding. He didn't suddenly make me feel brave. But God sat with me in my fear. I was too embarrassed to say it out loud. You know, that's one thing that I've learned in this journey. That God doesn't only show up in the miracles, even though he does, and even though he can. Sometimes he shows up in the breakdowns, in the mirror that you're too scared to look into, the quiet moments where you are feeling the most fragile. He shows up when you feel like your life is peeling away. And even through my symptoms, even though my symptoms kept changing, even when my body kept surprising me in the worst ways, even though I felt weaker than ever, God never changed. He didn't back away from it because I was falling apart. He didn't wait for me to, quote unquote, fix my attitude or be more positive. He didn't ask me to be strong. God just stayed near. Hair loss wasn't a small chapter for me. I mean, it was a breaking point, a humbling point, a moment where I realized how tightly I had been holding on to parts of myself I didn't want to lose. But in a strange way, a painful way, it became a reminder what God was doing in me was deeper than anything a mirror could see. It didn't make me understand then. Honestly, I barely understand it now. Losing my hair taught me something I'll never forget. Even when the outside of me feels like it's falling apart, God is still guarding the part of me that matters. The part that can't be lost. The part that can't be uprooted. The part that can't fall out. My spirit and my purpose and my story. As scary as that season was, still is looking back, something in me held on. Very weak, quiet, but faithfully. A tiny piece of me inside just whispering, "You're still here and God is still with you, even through this." You'd think fear would make you fight, make you dig and dig until you find the reason why your hair was falling out like water, slipping through your fingers. You'd think fear would push you into action, but it didn't. If anything, the panic drained me. It stole whatever strength I had left. Every day, more hair would fall out, more clumps, more strands that would just slip away without my permission. And every time I saw it, something inside me tightened, like a fist around my throat. But I couldn't make myself start searching for answers. People assume that if you find something wrong, you automatically want to fix it. But for me, that was not always true. It wasn't true for me when you lived through the kind of fear that I had. Not when you know what it feels like to chase answers and end up more broken than when you started. I watched the bald spot on my scalp grow bigger and bigger. Slowly at first, and then suddenly so fast. It scared me. My heart raced constantly. My breathing was tight all the time. I'd sit in my bed thinking, what if this never stops? What if this means something is worse? What if? It dragged my life constantly. But even with all that fear, I couldn't bring myself to dig deeper. Because I remembered the last time when I was sick, like really sick, and no one could explain why. That season where I went from doctor to doctor, test to test, praying for the answers, but terrified of what they might be. And then the day I finally get diagnosed, I thought it would bring peace. I thought knowing would mean fixing. But instead, I learned the truth. There was no fix, and there was no cure. No getting better for good. Just managing and surviving. That moment changed something inside me. It cracked something open I never fully healed from. So when the hair loss started, when my symptoms added up, when the fear rose up in me, it felt like an old wound opening. That memory of sitting in the doctor's office, hearing there's not a cure, came back like a shadow I couldn't outrun. And suddenly, searching for answers didn't feel brave. For me, it kind of felt dangerous. Because what if it's like last time? What if I found out something new was wrong? And what if it was something I couldn't fix? Something I'd have to live with forever? What if I got another diagnosis that didn't come with a cure? Just another list of symptoms I'd have to accept. People don't understand that kind of fear unless you live it. The fear of knowing. The fear of having a name to something you can't control. The fear of letting your hope rise only for it to be just cut right back down with a few medical words on paper. So no, I didn't dive into research. I didn't go searching for the answers. I didn't make appointments. I Googled every once in a while, but I didn't ask questions. I just lived in panic. Panic in the shower. Panic in brushing my hair. Panic putting on hats to cover the growing spot. Panic seeing myself in the mirror, but hiding it from people because admitting it made everything feel too real. And the worst part, the panic was familiar. It felt like the same panic I've lived before I ever knew what pause was. That helplessness, the helpless feeling that something was happening inside my body, but I couldn't stop it. That feeling of being trapped in a story I didn't want to be living. That feeling that any answer I found would only lead to more questions, more fear, or more heartbreak. So I chose not to look. Not because I didn't care, because I'd say I cared too much, but because I was afraid of the history repeating itself. afraid of hearing another doctor say, this might just be something you'd have to live with. Or, afraid of having to grieve another part of myself. And deep, deep down, beneath panic, beneath fear, beneath the exhaustion, I was scared that once again I'd find out what was wrong, but still have no way to fix it. So I stayed still. I lived with the tension. I pretended I didn't see the hair on my pillow. I pretended the balding, wasn't growing, that the spot wasn't getting bigger. I pretended I didn't notice it when people looked at me a second too long. But every night when it was just me, God, and the silence, the truth settled in. I wasn't just avoiding the problem. I was avoiding the pain of another answer I couldn't handle. And somewhere inside me, I think I knew that God understood that at the time, even when no one else did. Safe to say, the bald spot didn't stay small. At first, I told myself that it wasn't growing. I learned how to excuse it by blaming the lighting or the angle, the mirror. I parted my hair differently each morning, convincing myself if I could just place it right, that it wouldn't look as bad. But the truth has a way of resurfacing. So no matter how careful I was, how carefully I tried to hide it, it got bigger by the day. What started as a patch slowly widened, stretching into something I could no longer pretend wasn't there. My scalp showed clearly now, pale and exposed. I was very vulnerable. It felt wrong, like something private had been forced into open. I memorized ways to cover it. I avoided wind. I avoided swimming. I avoided sudden movements that might reveal the secret I was carrying. But while my hair disappeared, safe to say, my strength did too. I grew weaker by the day. Not just tired, but deeply, overwhelmingly weak. The kind of weakness that settles in your bones and refuses to leave. My body felt unreliable, like it might betray me at any moment. Simple things took more effort. Staying too long made my legs shake. Smiling through conversations that drained me was what little energy I had left. Still, I lived my life like everything was normal, at least outwardly. I'd show up, I'd laugh, I went places, I walked through the world wearing a version of myself that looked fine, while inside, I was unraveling and learning how to hold myself together in public while falling apart in private. There was a strange loneliness in that, a quiet isolation that came from being surrounded by people and still feeling completely unseen. Behind closed doors, I tried everything. I added countless medications, pills, lined up on my counter, each one carrying a small spark of hope. I used medicated shampoos that kind of burned my scalp and foamed and felt like Vicks Vapor Rub on my scalp. That left my hair a little stiff and a little sticky sometimes. I'd follow instructions carefully. Desperate to do everything right, I watched my hair grow a tiny bit back, like little stubborn stubble, and it felt like my heart just lifted just enough to believe that maybe this was it. Maybe this was a turning point. But then it would just fall right back out again. Over and over. Hope and then loss. It was just growth and shedding over and over. Belief and then disappointment. Each time it happened, I'd confidently say that it hurt worse. It hurt worse than the last time. It felt cruel, like my body was teasing me, offering me proof that it could grow hair, only to take it away again. I stared at the small stipple in the mirror, wondering why something so small could carry so much weight. I wondered how many times my heart could go through the cycle before it could physically break. Every new treatment came with a silent prayer. Please let this be the one. I feel like even my family and my friends the ones that knew what was going on, I feel like they kind of felt a similar way as well. Like when I would get a new shampoo in the mail, my parents would be very optimistic outwardly to me to hopefully try to build some of my courage up. So I think the silent prayer was kind of all around. It felt like I was saying, like, please let this be the one. Like, every failure felt like another quiet grief, and I just didn't want to live that again. I walked around every day carrying this invisible war that no one saw. Like, no one saw the medications, and no one saw the scalp. Nobody saw the scalp treatments. No one saw the clumps of hair I collected in my hands. They didn't see the way my confidence was thinning alongside with my hair. How exhausted I was from pretending that I was not scared. At night, when everything slowed down, my fear, as usual, rushed in. I would run my fingers over my bald spot, bigger now and undeniable, and felt tears gather before I could stop them. I wondered how much more I could lose. I wondered who I was becoming. I wondered if I would ever recognize myself again. And yet somehow I kept going. Not because I felt strong, and not because I understood what God was doing, but because something inside me, fragile and flickering, refused to let go completely. I didn't always feel God's presence in that season. Sometimes all I felt was exhaustion and grief, but looking back, I see it now. He was still there. He was still steady when I was shaking. He was near when I felt completely alone. Like teaching my heart to live without answers. Teaching me how to trust Him when nothing made sense. Every day I showed up with an act of faith. That was my act of faith. Even if it didn't feel very holy, every smile cost me something, and every step forward felt heavy. Shamelessly, I wasn't brave. I was scared, but I kept walking. In a season where so much was falling apart, my hair, my strength, my certainty, God was quietly holding on to the parts of me that couldn't be stripped away. I mean, even then, especially then. Okay, that was something that my family and I honestly never ever thought I would talk about. I'm honestly still recovering from the hair loss season and chapter way more than I am still healing from me learning my POTS diagnosis. I mean, this was way more recent than I think a lot of my community really knows of. In the next episode, I'm going to be covering the chapters that I wrote about where I finally found the light at the end of the tunnel, or what it felt like. Finally getting some answers and seeing some new faces that could hopefully help me. In the next episode, I'll be adding on to finally feeling seen, finally feeling heard, and also breaking down it took so long, but it was God's timing. I wanted to thank y'all so much for listening and so much for caring and giving me the opportunity to share something so real in my life that I'm still facing to this day, but that I'm comfortable doing it because all of the love that the community has given me. Anywho, thank you so much again, and I'll talk to y'all next time. Bye.